I'm Karen Burns. Our first story tonight involves a group of women, a doctor, and a hospital. What happened to the women is extremely disturbing and in some cases shocking. In order to tell their story, we and they have had to use some clinical language which may make you uncomfortable. But we have done so because what happened to these women in Dayton, Ohio is something that can happen to anyone. It's the story of a system that has allowed a doctor to harm and in some cases to shatter lives. In fact, since our original broadcast of this story, over 50 women have called to tell us that this was their story as well.
He shouldn't be walking the streets, let alone having a scalpel in his hand.
I went to him for help. I didn't want to be his guinea pig.
I feel like he created a new sex organ for me, like he would for a man that had a sex change. This man reminds me of someone that did experimentation in Auschwitz that was unchecked, and no one could stop them.
I don't expect my current gynecologic peers to accept my work, and I am very willing to stand the test of time.
Dr. James C. Burt is a 67-year-old gynecologist and obstetrician in Dayton, Ohio. 22 years ago, he began to surgically alter the anatomy of women. Since then, he and the hospital which allows him to perform this surgery seem protected by a medical code of silence. Burt has spent these last years trying to perfect his technique while women were asleep under anesthesia. He does this, he says, to make women better sex partners, and he's called it the love surgery. But some women call him a butcher. Dr. Burt has been sued repeatedly for performing an operation that no other doctor has ever done. He remains in practice for reasons which we will explain, and he remains convinced that women are born with their sexual organs in the wrong place.
The axis is rotated so the organs that can't stand trauma are no longer being hit, and the penis is impinging and doing a better mechanical job in manipulating the clitoral area.
Do you consider yourself a pioneer of sorts?
In respect to the work we're talking about, yes. When Freud in 1912 said that anatomy is destiny, that in respect to the vagina, it certainly also was true. That is, that anatomy that is normal according to the textbooks, according to the anatomy books, may be very pathologic, abnormal.
What do you mean? Do you mean something
in
wrong?
reference to intercourse?
I hate to use the term Frankenstein, but it's almost like we're creating a new anatomy here, and in order to do that, some are falling by the wayside.
Dr. Bradley Busalco has seen Dr. Burt's idea of a new anatomy because he has examined 6 women Burt operated on. Busalco, a leading gynecologist in Cincinnati, was sought out by some of Dr. Burt's patients after doctors in Dayton refused to treat them. When he spoke to us off-camera, Dr. Busalco expressed horror and outrage. Before he appeared on camera, the doctors in his community told him to keep quiet. He agreed to talk to us despite that, and despite his fear of legal repercussions. When you first saw Dr. Burt's patients, had you ever seen any kind of surgery done like that?
I can honestly say I have not.
Is there any medical benefit to be obtained from it?
I feel that there's none.
He did things to me that I never dreamed existed.
What do you mean?
Well, circumcision, which when I got the bill, I thought, heavens, I've gotten a man's bill.
Cheryl Sexton went to Dr. Burt in 1984 with bladder problems. Janet Phillips complained of cramps and heavy bleeding when she went to Burt in 1981. They expected Dr. Burt to perform surgery, but what they neither agreed to nor even imagined was that Dr. Burt would circumcise them.
I had one doctor to examine me, and when he started doing the pelvic, go, oh my God, who filleted you?
I couldn't understand why he'd want to do this. I mean, why would you circumcise a woman?
It's just snipping a little bit of skin, really. And it has been reported to increase the sensitivity of the clitoris in 3 out of 4 women.
This is a procedure that in Africa is considered punishment. Why is it?
No, it isn't. What they do in Africa
It's
is
considered a form of punishment to women in Africa. Why is it
taking the
different
little
here?
bit of skin off.
There is no reason from a sexual standpoint that I know that would justify removing the prepuce.
Dr. Burt says that is to make a woman more sensitive.
I'm certain it will make a woman more sensitive, but I'm not certain that that's desirable.
The hood that he cuts off from over the clitoris is there for a reason, for protection. And it's easier for me to understand how important that is because now mine is exposed. And to wear jeans, if you get bumped there, if you're during sex foreplay, if you're touched roughly, it is very painful.
It does make you more sensitive at first. You know, you can't even stand to wear pants. But then you get to the point where, you know, you lose all feeling there. I don't know how a castrated man feels, but I feel like, you know, he's taken so much of my desire away. I feel like he's just taken everything from me.
Dr. Burt's office calling. I'm just calling to confirm that Dr. Disney...
Dr. Burt has not only performed circumcisions, but he actually repositions female organs. All, he says, to improve women sexually. Most of the women we spoke to did not go to Dr. Burt because of sexual problems.
I'm not meaning to harp on it. Was he into that because he couldn't have sex at home?
But after a visit with Dr. Burt, many of the women we spoke to said they left feeling that he was a man obsessed with sex.
He kept asking me about being able to climax. Are you able to climax? And I kept repeatedly told him, I have no problem.
No American medical journal has ever agreed to publish Dr. Burt's theories. But in 1975, he wrote this book, Surgery of Love. It is a detailed explanation of his methods and his philosophy. In it, he says, the difference between rape and rapture is salesmanship. And he goes on to advise husbands to use force, if necessary, to give women multiple orgasms.
The book was very misunderstood. My attempt, number one, was to use a language that people often use in the privacy of their own life but can understand.
What did you mean, by the way, when you said in your book that you'd like to see women all be horny little mice? Isn't that a degrading phrase for someone who says he's a champion of women? I find that a degrading phrase.
I was probably a very poor writer.
If this weren't so sad, I would laugh at that. Who is he to say that he can improve upon what God made? I did not ask this man to improve.
Sandy Shockey didn't ask Dr. Burt to do anything other than deliver her first child. But years ago, while she was still under anesthesia, Dr. Burt performed his love surgery on her without her knowledge or her consent. Joy Martin was just 16 when Dr. Burt delivered her son. She, too, was asleep when he tried his technique on her.
I didn't have any control. I didn't have any say-so. I feel like a real crime was committed.
Why did you operate on hundreds of women without telling them exactly what you were doing? You say in your book, in many hundreds of these patients, the patient had not been informed that anything had been done to her.
Oh, this was at a time when the technique change was so little that it was
Not worth mentioning to her?
It was not worth claiming as some different technique other than an episiotomy repair.
But Dr. Burt's book contradicts him. In it, he admits that he tested his love surgery, saying that hundreds of women provided an ideal source of material for evaluating his work. You were obviously experimenting on these women without telling them.
The woman knew she was going to have vaginal surgery.
The woman knew she was going into childbirth.
And I was...
But what gave you the right to make that kind of a change without informing the woman. You're using a person as a guinea pig when you do that.
No, that's not true, because every surgeon in doing any surgery may have minor variations in change.
That wasn't minor. We had a condition here where the labia minora were brought inside the vagina. A large fold of skin had been brought over the opening to the vagina. The tissues between the vagina and the rectum had been thickened. These are not minor.
Once you had the surgery, what happened when you woke up?
It is the worst pain I have ever felt in my life. I can't even... It was awful.
It's like a life sentence that was put on my head 19 years ago that I can't shake. Some of the infections would be so bad that I would bleed. I would have to be catheterized with a bag hooked to my leg, and the bag would fill with blood. It's been horrible.
What's the most major change, do you think?
Most major change is the sex life.
What has it done to your sex life?
When I went back for my checkup, I told him that sex was extremely painful. And he says, it's just the change of everything. So tell your husband not to take no for an answer. Just keep trying. The more you do, the better it gets. So I thought, okay, I'll try it. And I told my husband, and we have continued to try, but as of yet, it hasn't gotten better.
The pain is extreme. I'm not talking about a little bit of discomfort. I mean sharp, piercing, knife-like pain that feels like something is tearing inside you. That what little joy you do feel during sex, it just doesn't seem to be worth it.
With any surgery, it's possible to harm. Now,
Do you harm more than other surgeons?
No, I harm less.
You've had a number of lawsuits filed against you. More than average. Why do you suppose that is?
I think part of it is that if a woman does have a complication of surgery in this area, she can become very antagonistic.
In fact, Dr. Burt has had 10 malpractice suits filed against him in just 12 years, while most OBGYNs have faced perhaps 2 in their careers. But because Dr. Burt carried no malpractice insurance and his assets were secured in his wife's name, the suits against him were dropped. And so he continues to practice within full view of the Dayton medical community and with the knowledge and complicity of this hospital, St. Elizabeth's.
Dr. Burt has found within this hospital a way to do experimental surgery without close supervision.
St. Elizabeth's, whose patron saint ironically protected helpless women, is a Catholic hospital. It doesn't allow vasectomies, tubal ligations, or elective abortions to be performed here. Yet it's the only hospital in Dayton that gives Dr. Burt privileges to perform his love surgery, despite being named defendants in 4 of his malpractice suits.
And now we talk to nurses. It says, I don't want to lose my job. But he has been running women for years.
And how many other hospitals are allowing not this particular thing, but, I mean, this is experimental surgery. What laws are there that protect us from him or physicians like him?
There are no federal laws which regulate experimental surgery or prohibit a doctor from practicing, no matter how many times he's been sued. But in Dayton, where hospitals are desperate to fill beds, someone like Dr. Burt can be an asset. A busy OBGYN can bring a hospital close to $1 million a year. Furthermore, Dr. Burt owned land the hospital wanted for parking lots and other expansion. And in 1981, a year they were both facing a malpractice suit, Burt sold the hospital his land. Finally, the problem may lie with the system itself. St. Elizabeth's refused our repeated requests for an interview. Why, with the exception of you, has no other doctor in this community been willing to talk to us on camera?
Physicians are very afraid to talk about other physicians or about anything related to medicine because they are potentially liable for saying something, and they're not experts at law.
Dr. Robert Hilty, a practicing gynecologist, was the chief of gynecology at Dayton's Kettering Medical Center. Of the 20 doctors we spoke to, he was the only one willing to speak publicly. Some called Burt dangerous, a quack, and a charlatan. But as Dr. Hilty points out, concern for the patient may be overwhelmed by fear of the law.
We can try. We can peer review. We can all get together, and 15 members of a department, 14 can say that 15th member is doing things wrong. But it won't stand up. It won't get any further than us saying that.
You mean because it's got to stand up in a court of law?
It's going to eventually stand up in a court of law. And I guarantee you can look in the annals. There hasn't been one of those that's been won by the institution or the majority.
St. Elizabeth's also refused our request for permission to shoot inside their hospital. These pictures were taken with a hidden camera. Several high-level personnel, however, were concerned enough to talk to us on background. They told us that many of the staff wanted Dr. Burt removed, going so far as to call him crazy and a mutilator. But the hospital's attorneys decided nothing should be done.
You have got to keep trust someplace, especially a hospital. You go in there and you're put to sleep. Your family isn't in that operating room and say, now, wait a minute, I don't think you should cut right there. Your attorney isn't standing there saying, whoops, that's against the law to cut there. I mean, you're asleep.
Before these women went into surgery, they were given this indication that they might be at risk. A consent form issued by St. Elizabeth's, calling the surgery not documented, not generally accepted, not yet duplicated, and unproven. But Dr. Burt told the women the form was routine, so they say they didn't read it.
I've never seen a form like it anywhere else.
You haven't?
I have not.
Well, what does that say to you about the hospital if they ask patients to sign a form like that?
I think that the hospital is trying to avoid litigation, and I think that the hospital is deficient in policing this particular physician with regards to this particular surgery.
The work that I have done is very seriously motivated. It is to enhance the lot of women, but I do get pretty tired of people criticizing.
Well, why don't doctors like you?
I don't know. Is it because I have pioneered something and they're jealous? I've had professional jealousy from the days of my obstetrics.
Well, now, that sounds a little paranoid, though.
Yes, it does. And, if you think you're being followed and you really are followed, you're not paranoid.
I'm not the person I was 4 years ago. Everything's much harder, much more intense. When you make love with your spouse, you have a closeness. This is a time you share, and you share everything. And now it's almost totally impossible for me to share everything, because I can't.
There's times I sit down and I just cry. I feel now that I am a prisoner to the house almost. I don't go out and date. I just would rather stay with myself. Because I don't want to go, if you meet a guy, you don't want to go through explaining to them what your problem is. I just kind of stay with myself.
Were these women who went to see Dr. Burt simply naive?
To some degree, but no more than most patients who come in the office. I think that if you were an unscrupulous physician, you could take advantage of the majority of patients who walk into your office. I don't think that would be difficult.
Well, how do we trust if that's the case?
I think it's all we've got right now. I think that it really takes a leap of faith a lot of times when you walk into that doctor's office for the first time.
Okay, in your family, is there any heart vascular kidney disease? Any do blood relatives now, okay?
No.
Dr. James Burt continues to practice, and the system continues to let him. He believes he has made a contribution to mankind, and that one day history will vindicate him. No matter what, he says, he'll fight to keep his work alive.
Think over the options, and then if you wish to go ahead, we'll set it up.
The story you have just seen generated an extraordinary response when it was first broadcast last winter. Ohio Governor Richard Celeste called for an immediate investigation by the state licensing board, and employees from St. Elizabeth's Hospital, who for years had remained silent, confirmed our story and suggested that Dr. Burt may have been a danger to more than just the women in Ohio, to their children as well. These doctors and nurses say that Dr. Burt sedated women so heavily during delivery that it may have hurt their babies. This obstetrics nurse, who spoke with Dayton CBS affiliate WHIO-TV on the condition that she not be identified, said that she assisted Dr. Burt with over 100 deliveries.
The babies would come in, and you'd have to keep a very close eye on these kids because they could stop breathing. They didn't have the energy or anything to do this because they're so doped up. They're just completely sedated, just like the mothers are. Sometimes the babies, 24 hours later, still were the same way. And we've always wondered if the babies had any brain damage because of it.
After delivery, this nurse says she watched Burt perform his love surgery on many unsuspecting women.
Then he'd take his forceps after he rearranged everything, and he'd go up and down on it, on the clitoris, until they would have a climax type reaction. Because that way, then he said that he was sure that everything was in the proper place.
2 months after our story aired, Dr. James C. Burt, charged by the Ohio State Licensing Board with gross immorality and 41 violations of the Ohio Medical Practices Act, surrendered his license permanently. He agreed never to apply for a new one anywhere in the United States. Burt has left Dayton, and he's left no forwarding address. To this day, though, Dr. Burt contends that our story is a conspiracy of lies.